Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of Under the Rug. I'm your host, Nalini Tranquim. Now, if you have ever heard yourself saying, I am a mistake, I am a failure, I am a quitter, then you have got to stay tuned. I am having a raw conversation with an incredible man, Rob Mason, who is a mental health advocate, expressing his passion through speaking, writing, and mentoring. Rob and his wife, Karen, were the lead pastors of a church in Perth, Western Australia, for 23 years. They have 2 adult children, Emily and Jake. Now, Rob is the author of Shame Off You, which I have got a copy right here. It is a book that focuses on the shame connected with mental health struggles. It's a book that calls the reader to stop settling for concealing, distracting, and numbing shame. It describes the way out of shame as being a daring journey that encompasses courage, vulnerability, and dramatic ebbs and flows. Oh, I love that. So grab your coffee, find a cozy spot and get those headphones on if you're heading out. Drive safe if you're on the road, and let's get into it. Rob, welcome to Under the Rug.
Oh, it's so good to, this is going to sound really weird, it's good to be under the rug with you, Nalini. Let's get under the rug.
That's a little bit cheeky.
I'm off to a really bad start. I'm very cheeky. Okay, can only get better from here.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, but I also want to thank you for writing your book.
Oh, my privilege.
My goodness, thank you for being so honest, because honestly, it gives people permission to be honest with themselves as well.
Yeah. Well, you can relate to it. It's one of those things. I had to write the book, if not for myself, but obviously for a wider audience of people who are going through, similar challenges. Yeah. And it's quite ironic that I wrote a book, because throughout primary school, high school, English was not my sweet spot. I was really bad at English, probably still am. I didn't like reading. I didn't like writing. I failed the HSC, and I certainly failed English. So I never thought in my wildest dreams I would ever be able to even articulate my thoughts and experiences. But yeah, grace of God, he sort of got me in a place where, and you know the journey yourself, that vulnerability of, you start the journey, you think, oh, this is going to be a good book. And then you go, what on earth am I doing? Yeah. Am I kidding myself? Who's going to read it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's daunting. Now, when I asked you originally, when we were talking about you coming on the show, I asked, what scenario from your own personal journey can you bring to the table that you believe will resonate with my Under the Rug listeners? Your response was, my private world began to implode in early 2007.
Yeah.
Talk to us. What happened?
Well, from my perspective, all was going reasonably well from the outside looking in. I was a son of a pastor, and I was still in church, which is quite a miracle. Still love God. And yeah, I'm in this church, and we're doing some really good things in the city of Perth. We've got credibility, and outside looking in, yeah, I'm this guy that's leading this church that's quite innovative. We began in the pub. We were doing work among the poor, homeless, people with mental health issues, and we were this real eclectic community of believers. And as things were going really well, in a moment, everything changed by just going out, having a meal with my wife and some friends. And I had my first panic attack in a public place. What? And like a lot of people, I know you've experienced them as well. The first one in some ways is the worst, because you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Is it some people say, oh, the first one was like a heart attack. I didn't think it was a heart attack. I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. I thought I was publicly going crazy. And with anxiety, your mind tends to catastrophized. So within
Yeah.
seconds, I saw myself in a psych ward. I saw my wife
Oh,
divorce me, out of ministry, totally disqualified. And this is all within seconds. And I'm, hyperventilating. I had to run out of the restaurant because I was afraid of what is this and what does this mean? So I knew then life is going to be very different. Ministry is going to look different.
wow.
Thankfully, I didn't end up in a psych ward. And even if I did, God's grace is there for that. But it was just a really long journey of counseling and learning the physiology side of anxiety, learning to take control of my breathing, my bodily response, all the time trying to figure out where is God in all of this? Where is this going to lead? How long is this going to take? And after about 6 months, why does it seem like I'm going backwards? Why is it getting worse?
Oh, wow.
Particularly and I don't like the term anymore because I don't even know what it means, but in a Pentecostal sort of setting, there's a sense of, am I an embarrassment to our movement? Because
Right.
1 year, 2 year, 5 year, I'm still struggling with panic attacks and I should be, the overcomer. And so it's been a very messy time. But then I think you could relate to this. I discovered that spirituality is messy. It was never meant to be tidy and orderly. I was probably kidding myself up until 2007 that I can just have this orderly life that could be impressive, and yet God just was almost like God in his mercy said, Rob, enough.
Yeah.
Let's do a deep work. And it's like, oh, can we do it in private? It was like, no, this is going to be very public.
Very public. That's the thing with shedding of layers, right? It's going to happen at some point. Yeah, absolutely. Did you get any kind of
many layers?
Yeah.
And the whole thing of, sorry.
I was going to say, did you have any sort of forewarning that this was coming? Did you sense that this was going to happen, or did it happen just like that?
It happened like that, but through counseling, I saw there were warning signs. I just, like a lot of people, I ignored them, denied them. Things like insomnia. For years, I wasn't sleeping well. I was always thinking, if I went to a meeting with a group of pastors, straight away I felt inferior. I felt like I didn't belong.
Wow.
I should have at that point thought, Rob, where is that coming from? But who's got the luxury of that sort of time to do times of reflection? And I don't know if it's possible at that level to do it on your own. I actually needed someone skillful to take me back to those defining moments. I like to call them my defining moments of dysfunction, and to make sense of it and know that it hasn't been wasted. Yeah. So it was sudden, but then now in hindsight, I thought, oh, Rob, there were so many signs, but I just, should be right.
Yeah.
Soldier on.
We are going to reference that line later on in our conversation. Right. What was the domino effect then of the anxiety and the panic attacks on your family, on your loved ones, like your life, your immediate life?
For the family, my children were probably, both were in probably primary school, late or early high school. So they were old enough to know what is going on. They knew something was wrong. There would be times we went out for a meal and I had to leave, and then I'd come back and it was like, what was that? It was, I was just feeling unwell. Yeah, right. Or a time I took Jake out to the movies, and about a third of the way through, I started having a panic attack and I had to say, sorry, we've got to leave. And then as we're leaving, he's going, Dad, what's up? I said, oh, look, I'll tell you later. It's, if it was a headache, it'd be easy to explain, but when it's emotional for a kid. So I was sort of torn between, I wanted to protect them and I didn't want them to know what was going on. But at the same time, I thought, well, I wanted them to enter into my world. And so to realize, look, it's emotional. There are times my heart just beats uncontrollably. My breathing goes really crazy. And sometimes I can breathe through it and other times I can't, and I've just got to leave. And so it was impacting on them. And then for my wife, nothing equipped me to deal with my stuff, but then nothing really equipped my wife, Karen, to deal with, well, what do I do with my husband, who's a pastor?
Yeah.
And sometimes those boundaries are really blurred. And
Yeah.
what's the right response? Do I, not that I wanted sympathy, but, what does compassion look like?
Yeah.
How much of it's just, oh, look, let's just get the elders to pray for you, lay their hands on you, get filled afresh with the Holy Spirit. And it was like, it wasn't that easy. Sometimes it is for people, that's their experience, but my experience, it was like I was filled with the Spirit, but I was also filled with a lot of pain, and it was just coming to the surface. And I think it's possible to be filled with the Spirit and be filled with pain and doubt and
100%. I mean, it wasn't too long ago where I was battling with, I was diagnosed with PTSD. We had experienced an extremely horrifically difficult time as a family. And I spiraled, and it was crazy because people were seeing it as if I was falling away from God. And I felt almost like a split personality, because it was hard to say that I'm actually in a really good place with God.
I know.
Like we're great, but I've got this PTSD that I'm trying to navigate,
It's like people in grief. On the one hand, they're the ones that need counsel, but at times they've got to give other people counsel on how to respond, which seems crazy, doesn't it?
I know.
It's almost like you really don't know what to say, do you? You don't know what to do with me. I'm dealing with grief, or I'm dealing with anxiety, and you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing. You don't know, do we ignore it? Do we just pretend it's not there? Or do we keep talking about it? By keep talking about it, does it make it worse? And so my wife, Karen, said, how do I respond when you're in the early stages of a panic attack? And I said, the last thing I want is you to say, calm down, are you okay, relax. All I need you to know is I'm going through it, and that's about it. I'll get through it. I've got through it before, but the worst thing to do is panic about panic. The worst thing for you to do is, okay, breathe. I know how to breathe. I just need some space. I need to see in you just a quiet confidence. Okay, it's having another episode. We'll go through it. It lasts a few minutes. Well, the intensity lasts a few minutes. The impact of the panic can last several hours. You just feel wiped out. And then the spiraling questions, why then? What did I do wrong? When's it going to happen again? And it sucks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, though, because that's going to be invaluable for people who have loved ones who are navigating this.
Yes.
What to do, what not to do.
Yeah, well, certainly. And as Christians, we mean so well sometimes.
I know.
Pray more. The Bible says don't be anxious. So just don't be anxious. It's like,
don't quote the Bible at me right now.
I don't. And, when Paul or even Jesus is talking about anxiety, they're talking about the anxiety associated with no food, no shelter. They're not talking necessarily this 21st century hyper, the world we live in now.
Yep.
Although first century, hey, you got the Roman Empire, so that was tough.
True. True.
21st century is insane when it comes to our mental health. We are on call 24/7. If you forget that Jesus, sometimes he would walk for 2 days between ministry times. Imagine that, a day of walking outdoors, Mediterranean sun, and the diet they had. And then here we are, 21st century, where
go.
We're on the phones and we're doing this and we're doing that, and the expectations. So no wonder, I think our pace of life, including the church and Christian leaders, it's
absolutely,
maybe it's even more complicated because of our faith, our expectations, and so on your own level, anxiety, mental health is challenging, but then you bring your children, your parents, loved ones into it, siblings, and then you bring in the church community, and then you bring in, well, for me, it was the eldership. And if I share with the elders, which I did, are they going to have a meeting about, well, what do you reckon? Can Rob carry on in his state?
Yeah.
And I just took a risk. I just said, well, this is who I am. This is what I'm going through. So I shared with the elders very early in the piece saying, this is what's going on. And within about a month, I shared with the church that I was getting counseling, because I just thought,
Wow.
if I can share with the church and say, look, come on the journey with me and be really open, even when I went on medication, it almost took out sometimes I think when there's a vacuum because there's silence and no one's talking about mental health. Well, now the pastor's talking about it, not because he studied it, he's going through it.
Going through it.
It almost gives permission for everyone to think, this is okay.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to create this platform, because this is life, right? This is real life. And let's face it, you don't often hear a pastor in the thick of ministry, in that position, owning up to the struggle that he's facing.
Yeah. Well, no one told me to. And I didn't do it to be this, wow, what a vulnerable person. It was almost like the church we had our strengths, we had our weaknesses, but one of our strengths, and if you talk to anyone that was part of our church community, would be the area of grace, vulnerability, rawness. It's always been that way. Our worship was raw and vulnerable. Our community, when I shared in my preaching, I didn't just give theology. I just said, hey, this is what I'm wrestling with. And so I just said to people, and we didn't lose anyone. I was thinking, I wonder if we're going to lose anyone, oh gosh, we've got a basket case for pastor. it was almost like I had more credibility, which sounds bizarre. Yeah. My pain, my weakness was like, we can trust this guy.
Yeah. It made you relatable, I think.
Relatable is the key word. It was almost like, thank goodness, this guy, he's
normal.
He's normal. I've got a spiritual depth, but at the same time,
yes,
it's okay to be wrestling with God and wrestling with your own, nature.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been on both sides, a part of a flock, and then being on the other side as a worship director in London, which I talk about in my book. And I know you've read it. So
yes,
that's
read,
really awesome.
Oh, that was harrowing. Reading it was like, no, he said what?
Yeah,
no.
I know.
But it happens.
It does happen. But I think what my biggest lesson has been putting my leaders on pedestals and, almost expecting them to be perfect and not have any problems. So it creates a separation then between the sheep and the shepherd, when actually the shepherd has just been put in that position to lead and to nurture and to love, but they are just as human as the sheep, right?
Yes. And we shouldn't be surprised, because you read the Bible and the people that God chose and worked through, it's like, really? You chose Jacob and Abraham and Ruth Ruth was an amazing leader, but, she was an outsider. She wasn't Jewish. And it's fascinating. You go right back to a conversation God had with Moses. He said, look, here it is. When you get into the promised land, your people are going to look at other nations and they're going to want a king. And he said, whatever you do, don't go down that line. And of course, God allowed God's people, even Samuel said, hey, I know what you said to Moses. And God said, look, they haven't rejected you. They've rejected me. Appoint a king. But it was never meant to be that way. We were never meant to have that level of leader. We were to have that, the Moses type or what have you, but not a Saul or a Jezebel or whatever, because we've always needed leadership since the fall. In the garden, we didn't need an appointed leader. Adam and Eve were created equally, image bearers of God. God was the leader. God was the king. God was the prophet. God was the pastor. But since the fall, there's been this whole thing of wrestling for leadership. The man will now be head of the wife. Well, that wasn't in the beginning. That was afterwards. There's going to be this play of structure and insecurity and power and domination, intimidation. So we've been
Yeah.
wrestling ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Now, your journey, I mean, obviously goes right back. I've read your book and it's just off the charts. So to my people,
Thank
you need to get this book. Shame off you. It's absolutely brilliant. Now, your journey obviously goes back to childhood.
Yes.
And you actually say at one point in your book, if you're a parent, never underestimate the detrimental damage of silence and
Yes.
disengagement with your children when they experience trauma.
Yes.
Can you share with us how you came to this revelation for yourself?
Sure. And to give, I guess I got to applaud Brene Brown, because she was the one I think I quoted. And she articulated, I think what Brene's done for a lot of us, she's articulated what we've always known and sensed, but she gave language to it. So as a child, I had, from my perception, I had probably from the outside looking in, it was probably no big deal. I had my first experience of team sport. It was soccer. I didn't know how to play, but I guess when you're 5 and 6, all you want to do is run after the ball. But for whatever reason, I stood away from the pack. And they're kicking the ball to each other, and I'm standing away thinking, what if I make a mistake? Which begs the question, where did that come from? But eventually the ball came my way. I kicked it out, and some kid from the pack turned around and said, why did you kick the ball out? And it was almost like this echo, why did you kick the ball out? Ball out, ball out. And from there on, in that game, I didn't feel guilty, like I made a mistake. I felt shame. Wow. I felt inferior. I felt I don't belong. I'm not good enough. I'm not skillful enough. What made the situation worse was when I walked home with my dad, rather than dad saying, hey, gosh, that was a good kick. Yeah, but dad, I kicked that, but it was a good kick. And, that sort of, hey, it was only one game. Let's practice when we get home. Let's get together with some friends after school. Yeah. He was silent. Now, as a kid, you interpret the silence any way you can. So I began to join dots with dad's silent. It must mean he's embarrassed. Like I feel humiliated. My dad must be humiliated. So I told dad, well, I quit. I don't want to ever go back to that team. I don't want to play team sport. There was no, hey, come on, Rob, just hang in there, give it another month or whatever. It was just, again, silence. So I interpret that as, that's probably the best thing to do. Now, I'm not blaming dad. Of course. Because at that time, dad was unemployed and unemployable because of depression. So he was in his world. Yeah. And part of his world, because depression was, he was very passive, very silent, very disengaged. But as a parent, my word of encouragement, we're often afraid of, I don't want to say the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is say nothing. Yeah. And, sometimes we try to rescue and be the Messiah. Hey, it's not that big a deal. I think as parents, we need to validate whatever your child is experiencing. Oh, you must be disappointed. Yeah. Oh, that must have made you really sad. And then just to bring a bit of perspective.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Silence, yeah. Silence communicates. And silence and shame often go hand in hand. So it's almost like dad, he experienced shame and I experienced shame, and shame was begetting shame. And it was like, just don't talk, just don't challenge, don't just run away, do what Adam and Eve did, hide, hide from the other boys, just quit the team, hide, cover yourself up, and don't ever put yourself in that situation again. Don't ever do team sport, because chances are you'll do what you did before, let down the team. The crazy thing about it, I bet all those boys went home and probably didn't even think anything of my little mistake.
100%. Yeah.
But for me, it was just replaying in my mind. It was just over and over again. Why'd you kick the ball out? Why'd you kick the ball out? And shows you at a young age, you can start writing your own biography. You can start writing your own story about yourself of, okay, wow, failure is horrible. Avoid it at all costs. I failed. Right. No, I didn't just fail. I'm a failure. Yeah. So there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is, I made a mistake. I never felt guilty. I felt shame. I am a mistake. I don't belong. And it was just, I'm not good enough. And that has been my story, or was my story, for about 25 plus years.
Yeah.
Until that whole 2007 scenario, of which at first was like, oh, here we go again. I'm a failure. I don't measure up. I don't belong. But that's when the beauty of counseling came in, of who told you that?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Why did you believe it was true?
Yeah.
It was just a stun.
Well, because no one ever told you it wasn't true. So
exactly.
It became your truth. And then that became your
truth.
Cycle throughout life.
Yes.
Oh, it's no wonder it all imploded.
Yes. And I needed it to implode. It was almost like, I think I said it before, it was God's mercy. 2007, from one angle, was the worst year of ministry. I think from God's perspective, it was probably my best. Because it's like, Rob, do you really want to live with this for another 10 years, 20 years? You could even be successful. Your church could grow.
Yeah.
But really?
Yeah.
At what cost?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Mess is good.
Mess is good because it's the only way that we have a chance to heal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, just while you were talking, I just have this feeling that there's people listening to this today who are at imploding stage.
Yeah.
What's your advice to them?
Oh, you got to, it's easy for me to say it now, but you got to go with it. Don't try and prevent it.
Yeah.
See it as not God punishing you, but it is the mercy of God. And whether you feel it's coming on or it's just happened, God's not intimidated. God's not embarrassed. My encouragement would be, when I experienced that imploding, I was fortunate in my church. I had a key leader who was a mental health nurse.
Wow.
And I said to this lady, Lindy, I said, Lindy, I just had this bizarre thing. I don't know what it was. I described it within moments. She said, oh, Rob, that was a panic attack. And I thought, what is it? I've seen it on movies, people with a paper bag, and I didn't understand what it was. She explained it briefly, but she said, I've got a friend who's a counsellor, specifically CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. It was like, well, what's that? And she said, well, basically, she's going to listen a lot. You're going to tell her your story, and then she's going to look at your thinking and challenge it and help you to think differently. So it was like, well, so what? Not just take a tablet? She said, well, you might need that, but basically, she was the first one to say, Rob, this is going to be a long journey. Yeah, this will not be one session or a few sessions. You're talking about 30 plus years of habitual thinking and behavior and reacting. But God's going to be there on the journey, and the community is there on the journey. So for your listeners, the imploding is the mercy of God. The imploding is, okay, let's deal with the stuff. Let's go on the journey. There are times, if you go down the counseling route, there are times you'll come back from a session and think, oh, that is amazing. I've got it now. I think I'm almost through it. And then other times you come home and you're just wasted. Yeah. There are times I got home and Karen said, how was it? It was just, I just cried. It's getting worse, but it's like spring cleaning. Sometimes you got to make a real mess, get everything out, throw some stuff out before you put stuff back. And, but again, see the bigger picture. Yeah. And when everything hits the fan, it's okay.
Yes,
it's
absolutely. Okay. I don't know why this is, and I don't know if it was the same for you, but counselors and psychologists were certainly frowned upon when I was, I don't know what that is. It's always been, no, we'll pray for you, and God will heal you and you'll be fine. And it's always been put down as this is a spiritual thing and God will fix it. But to be honest with you, when I was at breaking point in 2019, and I had no choice, my doctor said to me, you need to see someone. And he sent me off to see the psychologist. It was the best thing I could have done. Yes. Because she actually brought practical strategy to the table to help me when I was right in the middle of panic
Yes.
attack, you know.
Yes.
And I believe that, you know, yes, we're spiritual beings, but we're also physical and mental beings too, you know. And yes, God can heal us just like this, but I think sometimes he needs us to go through the journey.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. My two children, who are both in their early 20s, both have type 1 diabetes. And so that was a shock when they were diagnosed with that. Emily was 16, Jake was 20, 21. And I thought nothing of them going to a GP, going to a specialist, getting insulin and whatever else. And yet, when there's an emotional turmoil, why is there suddenly, why would you go to a GP? Well, I need to go to a GP before I'm referred to a counsellor. Why would you go to a counsellor? Because I'm sick.
Yeah.
My brain's sick. My heart is sick.
Yeah.
And I think too, in, you know, particularly that more charismatic Pentecostal stream, we see, you know, spiritual warfare, yes. The power of prayer, yes. The power of positive confession, yes. But why do we see this conflict, whether it's either or? I just went for the works. I got prayer. I had people praying for me. You know, anytime there was an altar call for people with mental health, I went for it. But at the same time, I looked at my diet, because there were things possibly contributing to anxiety, depression through my diet, exercise, but then counseling. And like everything else, you know, I could say, talk to your GP. And for some of your listeners, they go to their GP and think, oh, that was hopeless. They just, you know, said, oh, here, I'll write a script. There are good counselors and not so good counselors. There are great therapists and really bad therapists. So I was fortunate. I went to a therapist who was brilliant. Yeah, great. And that helped a lot. Great. So sometimes you might have to go to one or two before you feel that connection. Absolutely. But persevere. But the first person you got to talk to is your GP, because they will put together with you a mental health plan, which is basically you writing out some things about your goals, what your experiences be, what do you want to desire through counselling, and then they'll give you a referral, which means then, depending on your financial situation, you can go on, get this mental health plan where you could get some sort of money back. So you might pay 120, you might get $40 of that back. At the end of the day, I just said, look, I don't care what I pay. Yeah, for sure. You know, when you get desperate. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So no shame. And I think that was another one of those tests of not being ashamed of seeing a GP, not being ashamed of seeing a counsellor, not being ashamed of, even with a counsellor, getting medication. It's all part of the journey of, well, if this is what it takes, so be it. Isn't it so interesting how every step of the way in your journey was actually confronting the one thing that caused the problem in the first place? Wow. And the beauty of, I guess, getting back to why I went public, if you think about the nature of shame, shame loves silence, shame loves secrecy. So if you take secrecy and silence out of the equation and you tell people, you disarm shame. Yeah, it's almost like shame goes, oh, wow. You can't have shame and vulnerability at the same time. When you're vulnerable and you share with people, it's like, well, shame's got, you just took all my power away. Wow. That is extremely powerful. Okay. That actually, I think, leads us then to the next question. You paint a horrifying mental health snapshot of Australia in your book. Oh, yeah. Remind me. I haven't looked at that page for a while. And it would be interesting to find out 2020 and 2021 with COVID. Hello. I know. Yes. I know. Okay. So page 39, guys, when you get the book, page 39, I'm just going to read the statistics out because it's harrowing. It says here, 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 85 experience mental illness each year. 45% of Australians will be affected by mental illness in their lifetime.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are nearly 3 times more likely to suffer mental illness than other Australians and twice as likely to die by suicide. Every day, at least 8 Australians die by suicide. This is Australia only, people. Suicide is the leading cause of death for Australians between 15 and 44 years of age. Now, you say a very interesting line at the bottom. You say, something is fundamentally wrong within the soul of my nation. We have a popular saying in Australia, she'll be right, mate. The fact is, she ain't right, mate.
She ain't right. We are the lucky country. We're one of the most prosperous, beautiful nations on planet Earth. And yet, behind closed doors, there's a crisis.
Yeah.
And we're probably, there's a lot more awareness. There's a lot more, not that we have to have the celebrity type of people, but I think it's helped having sporting personalities and politicians and, you know, media people, entertainers come out. But, you know, we probably also need to hear from everyday Australians that, hey, yeah, I'm suffering with mental health struggles. So hardly a week goes by where there isn't something on TV, whether it's, you know, some sort of current affairs, the project, or something where it's in our face, and it needs to be.
Yeah.
It needs to be. And yeah, amongst our Aboriginal Torres Strait, you can imagine and only imagine it's a whole nother level.
Yeah. How are we still missing the mark, though, for suicide to be so high? Like the leading cause of death in Australia. That's devastating.
Yes. From what I've heard, which is interesting, I would have thought 2020 there would have been a dramatic increase. But according to Lifeline, there was certainly a dramatic increase in people making contact. But I don't know, and maybe some of your listeners are more in touch, I don't know if there was an increase in the rate of suicide. But
I can answer that for Melbourne, because I'm in Melbourne, and I actually contacted the coroner's office during 2020 because I was extremely concerned about this. And they actually contacted me back and said, no, we have not seen a spike in suicide, which I thought was extremely interesting.
I was pleasantly surprised because I was ready for 2020 to be a year like no other year. And I think it still was.
Yeah.
Maybe because people were more vigilant, maybe because, I don't know, it'd be fascinating 2 years, 5 years to really look at this, you know, pandemic and how it's impacted us. But, you know, people working from home, having children at home, homeschooling and loss of income and isolation and all.
Yeah.
I'm amazed. But look, we haven't come through it unscathed. I don't think we've quite seen it yet. And I can certainly say 2020, I don't know about you, I was up until that point probably doing quite well in my mental health, but 2020, I certainly spiraled down. I had to go back on medication. I had to increase medication, and it was part of my deal. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm sure a lot of people who already had mental health issues, 2020 just, it went to another level. But then I would imagine many Australians who have done pretty well in life, you know, anxiety, depression hasn't been a big deal. I'm sure a lot of people went, wow, I experience anxiety at a level I've never experienced it before.
Absolutely.
So it was almost like, not good, but it was almost like there was a level playing field. We are all experiencing anxiety, trauma, fear, overwhelm. You know, once in 100-year pandemic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And we're doing well compared to most nations.
Yes, I know.
And yet it was insane. It was like,
Yeah. One of the topics I want to bring to the table is the argument pertaining to the church's involvement in state issues. And here's the thing. Surely the closer we as Christians get to our Heavenly Father, right? So the more we grow in wisdom, understanding, and discernment concerning the days that we face and the condition of our nations, surely then we should be coming up with solutions for society, right? That is quickened by heaven. So with this in mind, and with your own personal experiences with mental health issues, what should we as the church be doing to change these statistics, to be imparting into our next generation when it comes to things like mental health, right? And I'm not talking about the institution of the church. I'm talking the church, us as individuals. What should we be doing?
Oh, brilliant question. Because the church should be this redemptive community, this place, this safe place for people to go to. You know, it's almost like in the ideal world that the government and others should be looking to the church.
Yes.
But it's almost like, I don't think I even wonder, the church in Australia, are we ready to be that voice? I think we're still doing catch up. I don't know if we're ready to be the light, unfortunately. It's probably, rather than say your listeners waiting for the church, maybe it's more just the individual voices.
Absolutely.
That become a collective voice. It's not so much, well, this church or this denomination. It's a real grassroots, one-on-one, day by day conversations where, you know, we don't need to be looking, and I'm not putting this denomination out, but we don't have to be looking to Hillsong or C3 or the Baptists or I just think we probably actually need a grassroots movement.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need Brian and Phil and Bobby and whoever else. We just need the conversations with our family, with our friends, our colleagues. And
it's interesting. I've been revisiting Jack Canfield's book, his success principles. And his first principle is take responsibility.
Yes.
And I think so often we're looking to the institution of the church to fix things.
Guilty. Guilty as charged.
Yeah, of course. I think there's elements where we all have, right? But I think at the end of the day, for the day that we are in right here, right now, every single individual needs to start with self, right? Change starts with us as individuals.
Yes.
It's the only way that we're going to be able to bring about any sort of change.
Absolutely. And like you, look, I'm all for the church and the hope, you know, the church is the hope of the nation, la-di-da, but I think we forget that, well, the church is people. And it's the day-to-day. It's not just the Sunday gathering. It's the Monday to the Friday conversations, interaction. Because the moment we talk about the church, immediately we're on the defensive because people think, oh, the church. Whereas if I can just share my story, you share your story, your listeners share their story with the people in their world, that's when I think there's that collective credibility and authority and voice, but it's not under the umbrella of a particular brand. And so I really do feel, I'm thinking out aloud because I haven't been asked that question before, but because when you think about, you go back to the first century, it was it was the church in the city, but it was Priscilla and Aquila, and it was Barnabas, and it was John Mark, even after his, whatever, when parted ways with Paul. And it was just, the blind man, well, he got involved in a discussion with all these religious leaders, and he just, look, I don't know the theology, but all I know is I was blind and now I can see. And it was Jesus that did it. Yeah. So it's our story that people can't argue with.
No.
And, in a way, we're talking about brokenness, we're talking about mental health and everything else. Well, this is a time for the church to shine where,
absolutely.
We probably give the impression that we're holier than thou, we've got it together. It's like we are struggling with life and the pressures of life, with family, marriage, just like everyone else. However, we are part of community. Mm-hmm. And we have a God who is so much more compassionate, inclusive and redemptive and merciful than the world is aware of. And what a great opportunity.
Absolutely.
It's almost like when we're at our worst, we, the church, can be at our best.
At our best, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I want to actually ask you this question.
Yeah.
When
because we are under the rug, aren't we?
Yeah, man. Okay, are you ready for it?
I'm ready. This is not scripted,
No, it certainly isn't. And you didn't see the questions beforehand either.
Nope.
When you made the decision to be open and honest with your church about where
Yes.
you were at as their leader, you were vulnerable and you just poured your heart out.
Yes.
Did you find that it actually gave your people confidence to come to you with their own struggles?
Yes. Yes. Fascinating. Out of the woodwork, all these people almost with a bit of embarrassment. Look, don't tell anyone, but yeah, I struggle with panic attacks. And it's like, yeah, they came out of the woodwork. And it's like I gave permission. And not that I was strategic, I saw what was going to happen. No. I just took a risk. And I had to be vulnerable because that's our community. That's what we're known for. We're this messy church that started in a pub that have all these messed up people. Even though the core group of our church was a lot of very well-to-do middle-class people, we were just the most fascinating community that on paper should not have worked. And it was almost like, by me sharing my story, it was almost like we got back to what our roots were when we began in the pub. It's like, this is who we are, where we haven't got it together. We're messy. We're not that there's a pride in our dysfunction, but it was like, and why shouldn't our pastor, why would he be exempt, or why would she be exempt? So it was almost like, this shouldn't be a surprise.
This has been such a good conversation because mental health breeds in silence.
Yes.
And darkness and isolation and right. Whereas by talking about it, I mean, we're seeing it in your story. When you opened up, it gave people the freedom to open up and be real. Yes. And so I think you've really hit the nail on the head in that the more we talk about this and share our own personal journeys with our colleagues, with our friends, with our loved ones, with anyone and everyone, we're basically saying it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to own up that we are broken and dysfunctional, but we are stronger together. Yes. We don't face these alone, which is what mental health, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts wants you to think.
Yes. That's it. And that's part of that vicious cycle, that in the natural, you do want to hide, like Adam and Eve. You want to hide, you want to cover up. Yeah. And we've become a little bit more sophisticated. We don't do fig leaves anymore, but we can use Christianese and all sorts of Christian whatever and give the impression, we're in worship, we're just like this, and, we say the right thing. But what we need to do is almost allow God to uncover us, saying that covering doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It's temporary. Let me cover you with Christ and his righteousness. Yeah. And now that you're clothed, I want you to go out with this clothing and tell people about both. It's almost like we're talking about our brokenness and the righteousness of Christ all at the same time. So people see our brokenness, but then they also see Christ in our brokenness. Because in the book I did talk, and I think it's fascinating when you look at the cross, so much of what was happening there was vulnerability and shame, the way that Christ was tortured, executed. He was either completely naked or partly naked. It was public. It was brutal. It was all about, the Romans came up with not just torture, but we want to humiliate the victim. Yeah. We want to scorn them. We want to do all of that. And Christ went through it so that he can cover us with his righteousness. Beautiful. And so what people see is, yes, they see our brokenness, but then our brokenness points them to Christ, who is our covering.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, you don't want to just be a community of brokenness.
No.
We almost pride ourselves in our brokenness and how broken are you? Well, I'm more broken than you. We don't want that, but we do want the honesty, the vulnerability, and then pointing to Christ.
Absolutely.
Christ in us, the hope of glory.
Rob, thank you so much. Guys, I have to emphasize that I believe every adult, but also every parent needs to read Rob's book, okay? It's absolutely brilliant. It gives such an in-depth view of the mind of a child experiencing shame and fear for the very first time. And there are things that we as parents cannot control, but we can equip our kids to cope with and push through. So Rob, how can our listeners today get a copy of your book?
Yeah, very simple. If you go online to robmason.co or www.robmason.co, so no M, yeah, you'll go to my website, and then from the website, there'll be a few articles. Look, to be honest, I could be a lot better, a lot more proactive with articles, but go to the website and you can order the book. For anyone in Australia, it's about a $5 delivery. I would love to get the book into people's hands. And it's a really easy read.
It is.
I've actually written it particularly for men in mind, because I know for a lot of guys, for whatever reason, we're not great at reading apart from sports biographies and what have you, but it's an easy read. It's interactive. There's a lot of time for reflection.
Yeah.
And it's got a rule, there's a bit of theology, but then there's a bit of well-being, there's a bit of nutrition, there's just a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And it just takes you on a journey. And
it does.
I think people also be surprised by the last chapter. It doesn't quite finish how you expect a book like this to.
Say no more.
Say no more. Nalini, thank you so much, because you took a risk. You've read my book, but you don't know, well,
it was worth it was totally worth the risk. Now, before you go, we are going to close with on your marks, get set, go.
I didn't know this either.
Yeah. Which is 10 personal questions, because I just want my people to get to know you a little bit better, that you have to answer as quickly as possible.
Yes, okay.
Okay, so don't go anxious on me now. Okay, you ready? Okay, on your marks, get set, go. What was the last TV show you binged on?
It was Netflix. It was Formula One.
Okay. Oh my gosh, my husband would love you.
So good. So good.
I think there's a new series actually. Or is that what you've just binged on?
That's the one I watched. It was last year, 2020.
Okay.
So good.
We got to catch up. Okay, what's your favorite sport?
Favorite sport, surfing.
Oh, okay. What's your favorite meal?
Well, it used to be steak and lasagna, but I'm now vegetarian. So I'm yet to find a really good vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for nearly a year. So I'm yet to discover. Yeah.
That's a shift. Okay, paint us a snapshot of an everyday moment in your life that makes you smile.
I've got into swimming in an ocean pool in Sydney, and that's been 40 since I've done swimming, and I'm really getting into it. I love the ocean pool. It's cool. It's salt water outdoors, and my form's probably useless, but I just love it, and I finish with a smile on my face.
That is so great. That's so good. Okay, who's your favorite human?
Oh my gosh. Probably my favorite human, even though he's no longer with us, is Eugene Patterson. He wrote The Message, but as a pastor, he was the one like Brene Brown. He articulated my wrestling with the whole professional corporate aspect of church leadership.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yep.
Yeah. I should have said my wife. Oh dear. I hope she doesn't see this.
All husbands say that.
Isn't that terrible? I bet if my wife was interviewed, she would have gone, oh, my husband. Oh, gosh.
Okay, what's your favorite animal?
Oh, dog.
Okay, dog. All right. And what do you think of garden gnomes?
Garden gnomes? Yeah, I don't relate to them at all.
I get such a mixed response.
I like breaking garden gnomes or hiding them.
Okay, are you a tea or coffee drinker?
Coffee.
Okay, and how do you handle stress?
Probably not very well. Seriously. Even after the book, therapy, it's still, yeah. I've actually got this thing. It's called a Whoop. Yeah, it's one of those things that measures heart rate and everything. And my heart rate is most of the time way too high.
Through the roof.
Oh yeah, I've got to.
Okay, last question. What are you most grateful for in your life?
Oh, I should say my wife. I've got to redeem myself. And seriously, a family, because you can achieve everything in life, but to do that without family or someone in your life to share it with. And they've seen me at my absolute best, and they've seen me at my absolute worst. And I never felt judged, never felt disappointed, never felt like, I'm an embarrassment. So very grateful.
I love it. Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show.
So good to meet you. I'm sure our paths will cross at one stage
100%.
Now that borders are open.
Absolutely. Okay, well, people, I hope you've enjoyed the show. Go and buy the book. Grab it now. I will have all the details in the description field. We'll talk to you soon. Hopefully this will work.
I had once before been interviewed, and at the end, the guy said, "I'm so sorry, Rob. None of it's worked. We'll have to do it again." It was about 45 minutes. Like, oh, John.